don't care how stoic or resistant to struggle or whatever you think you are as a man. We all have skeletons in our closet. We all have a history. We all have wounds. We have triggers.
How do you think our relationship has changed over the last year? And then he went on, because he does this beautifully, but like he will open up and just transparently tell me.
Instead of making you or me the problem, let's separate and find the problem and then find resolution, and to do so.
A lot of women complain about their man not getting stuff done as if what the fuck are you doing? Why are you complaining? You're a man.
So you had to be on the fence at all times, unfortunately. So to be in this dynamic now where I'm like, okay, yes, we may be really struggling to find common ground. There's maybe some discomfort present. It's safe to be honest. Welcome to the podcast, y'all.
Hello.
Hello. We've been on a hiatus, I guess, huh?
Yeah, well, when you move and you have to reset up all this stuff.
Here we go. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to give a life update. We recently got some feedback from someone who said our podcast is great, but we spend too much time talking about our personal life before we get into it, which is great feedback. And that tells me that we need to do more of it. So
the reason, there's two things. Number one, if you look at the show notes and you don't want to listen to us talk about our lives, you can skip to the part where we talk to you about the information that you came for.
Bingo.
Number two, this is one of the most difficult things about being on social media is people forget you're a human. And we podcast, I guess I'll speak for me. I started podcasting because I just wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about without any pressure to put out some type of content that I know people want me to tell them about. So it's a platform, because we have many platforms, for us to just openly discuss things that we want to talk about. And if the subject matter is interesting to you, fucking awesome, stick around. If it's not, then maybe that episode's just not for you. And that's also okay.
I think you're asking for too much critical thinking skills.
Well, I'm not trying to insult people, but I do want you to remember that everybody with any platform, anybody who's on the internet putting themselves out there publicly, yes, we open ourselves to criticisms and scrutiny, fair enough, but also we're human. And I don't want to feel like the only time I can ever say anything publicly is because it serves somebody else's means to an end. That's not who I am, nor who I want to be.
Talk about only the things I want you to talk about, puppets. Serve me.
Yeah, it's like I'm not here to be at your disposal. I'm here to create what I want to create, how I want to create it. And if that's not what you enjoy listening to or watching, that's okay.
Yeah. So for the rest of you that just love our stuff and enjoy listening and you're here to get some value, that you shall receive. So today we're going to talk about not fat loss, not hormones. We're going to talk about
one of the best podcast episodes we've ever done, which was on gender roles and relationships.
Yeah, gender roles, relationships. But we had we were going on a walk earlier and you asked me a question, and your question was, how do you think our relationship has changed in the past year? Because we're coming up on a year in June.
Well, we've known each other for a year.
Yeah. Well,
you asked me to be your girlfriend in a parking lot around this time.
Yeah.
A year ago.
Right. And we've known each other longer than that. But yeah, we began our relationship around a little bit later than this time last year. And so I kind of went off on a tangent because our relationship has changed in some really beautiful ways that I'm very proud of. And it's only gotten better, and we've only gotten closer, and we've only gotten better at communicating and better at understanding each other. And I think that's really one of the biggest goals of a relationship.
So I think we need to start this conversation from the very beginning, which is start it as if we were just on that walk and I had just asked you that question. Because this entire concept of frameworks that you have was driven from a very authentic conversation that we had. And so I don't want to skip through that and like only fast forward and like rush through points. So if we circle back, because like the integrity piece, how this went about was whenever we go for a walk, I just like to ask people questions. Like if you know me, I just ask questions. And so I asked him, like, how do you think our relationship has changed over the last year? And then he went on, because he does this beautifully, but like he will open up and just transparently tell me everything that he thinks about what's changed positively, things that like I didn't even know you thought about me. But again, like maybe men can relate to your perception or your experience around that. And then that led into one of the things you value about me being integrity, which shifted into a conversation around how that's pointed at certain demographics of people, but not necessarily acknowledged on the other side. So I don't want to rush through that entire concept. I do want to break it down in a way that will resonate authentically if you're comfortable.
Yeah. So you want me to just kind of, I won't remember everything I said because I'm just saying it was a lot of the best part about these conversations are they're just spur of the moment and they just happen out of nowhere, which I really very much enjoy. From the first time we ever did it back when we took a trip to Kiowa, were your family vacations. We went on several 3-hour long walks where it was just a symphony of conversation. And we've never stopped doing that. And that's one of my favorite parts about our relationship and marriage. But pose the question again.
How has our relationship changed over the last year?
One of the biggest things that's changed is our understanding of one another. I think this is going to be the really valuable part for a lot of people, because one of the things that has really hit home is, when you marry someone, you marry everything. You marry their past, their wounds, their triggers, all that stuff. And there will come many points in your relationship and marriage, especially if you're pursuing anything of depth or substance, where you're going to face those things. You're going to have uncomfortable moments, situations you didn't see coming. You're going to see each other struggle. You're going to see each other face some hardship. And we've had the opportunity to do all of the above. You guys have no fucking idea what all Kait and I have had to navigate over the course of our relationship, from, outside scrutiny to, our own stuff coming up. And a lot of Kait and I's wounds or things that have happened to us in the past, they mirror one another. I used to be not so great of a guy. I'm never going to act like I've got it all figured out, but I've come a hell of a long way. And I do have a lot of pride in that. It took me a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of pain to now have the privilege of having the relationship, the person, the life that I do now. It's not a perfect life. It's not a perfect marriage, but it's the most amazing life and marriage I could have ever imagined. It's far beyond anything I ever thought I deserved or was ever going to have. And you've given me permission you've encouraged me to give myself permission to have all those things. And that's obviously been wonderful as well. But for me as a man, the peace that has come with being understood, I don't care how stoic or resistant to struggle or whatever you think you are as a man, we all have skeletons in our closet. We all have a history. We all have wounds. We have triggers, and those things are going to come up with your person, right? And so, but the fact that I know you understand where a lot of my stuff comes from, because we've had conversations at length about that, been very vulnerable with one another, starting from like the very beginning where we sat on the couch and we laid it all out. Here's every dirty nook and cranny of my history. Here it all is. So there's no surprises. There's nothing you can hear from anybody else that you don't know about me. It's all there, right? There's nothing that's left unsaid. So I think I will always advocate that for people. It's scary, but it's something I very much stand behind. But just knowing that I'm understood, knowing that, because when you have a problem as a couple, you can become very adversarial. You can try to win. You can try to score points. You can try to one up the other person, or you can say, here's the problem. Let's solve this problem together. Let's find compromise. Let's, instead of making you or me the problem, let's separate and find the problem and then find resolution, and do so while maintaining respect. And so that's been something that I have, I honestly didn't know I was ever going to find, because in my history, there was not a whole lot of that. It was always someone's wrong, someone's the adversary, someone's out to get you, someone's trying to hurt you, someone's lying, something, so you had to be on the fence at all times, unfortunately. So to be in this dynamic now where I'm like, okay, yes, I might be pissed off right now. Yes, we may be really struggling to find common ground. There's maybe some discomfort present. Maybe I'm getting a little bit annoyed or irritated or activated, we might say. But the person on the other side of the table wants to understand. She's asking questions that would signify that she wants to understand. She's not trying to poke at me. She's not trying to make me feel lesser than. She's remaining respectful and admittedly, you're better at that than I am, and something I've had to work on, but because of, everything I've been through. But that being said, just as a man, knowing that my partner wants to understand, and then I can be me instead of trying to posture and act like, nothing's wrong, or act like the problem, to deflect and act like the problem isn't what it actually is. It's safe to be honest. It's safe to say, yeah, I'm stressed out about this, or yeah, when this happened, it made me feel this way, or yeah, I'm really, you don't have to act like some statue who's unimpacted by anything. And that's just led to so much peace. And then I can just be me. So that's been something that has improved more and more over time. Let me keep going, or?
Well, on that note too, I think that there's a lot of the stigma around women require safety and security. I think it's not talked about enough how much men need safety too. And so if you think about men and how they're raised and even how culturally they're treated, women want men who have emotional intelligence and who have that depth of understanding. The trade-off there for men is when they go to that place and they are vulnerable, or they are scared, or they're fearful, or they're really stressed out and overwhelmed by something. There are women who will treat men as if what the fuck are you doing? Why are you complaining? You're a man. You're not a real man.
Man up.
And so when you get that reaction to something that is human and vulnerable, it stifles that. It's like, that's not safe for me to do. And so this is where the idea that men kind of bury their burdens comes from, because they're not all of them have this open and accepting and desire to understand. And the reality behind that too, because there's a trade-off in doing that as a woman. So if I'll just paint an example, this doesn't happen because I'm aware of it, but when men come to you with a problem, they don't want you to fix it. And I think one of the problems is if you are with somebody who comes to you with their problems and expects you to solve them, you are no longer their partner or their spouse. spouse or their wife, you are their mother. And this is where women become resentful of their husbands because they feel like now they're your mom, they're not your wife. And so when a man is faced with a problem, your job is not necessarily to solve it, especially if you want him to be confident in his abilities to lead and problem solve, right? Men get a lot of confidence and conviction around their ability to do that. So when there is a problem, you don't solve it, but you bring value. And so for me, my natural instinct is if I am aware of a problem that he's facing, I'm not going to go and fix it. I'm going to support his decisions to move through it, whatever they might be. If I need to be a rudder with some of the potential solutions that we have in place, I will do so. And I'll kind of play, well, have you thought about maybe the negative impact of doing it this way leading to that? Or what if, we aim to do it from this angle instead? And I think that allows him the autonomy to continue to confront problems and overcome them, right? I think this is the same issue people face in parenting. When you have a child who is struggling with something, if you remove the obstacle, you remove the lesson. If you remove the lesson, you remove the wisdom. And so it's difficult to watch somebody that you love struggle, but bailing them out never allows them to build the skill set or the mental fortitude or the critical thinking skills to overcome that problem when faced with it again in the future. And so it's supporting them and standing by them as they struggle, but continuing to push them to know that they can overcome what is in front of them. And I think that is a difficult line to ride, whether that's with your spouse or your child. But nevertheless, like a lot of women complain about their man not getting stuff done. But if you're also the one that comes in and saves the day every single time and you become resentful of that, if you want him to feel more desire for you, it's not mothering him. It's allowing him to figure it out and support him as he does so.
And the paradox here is that because of the peace in our marriage that has resulted from our non-negotiable, our vows, our word, our consistency and behavior, it allows us to be our full selves. I think everyone on this earth has potential to be, I just think everybody should have the opportunity to feel their potential, right? But we get so wrapped up in relationship and when it's not safe, when you're walking on eggshells, when you can't be you, or you're trying to maintain a house of cards because there's no, integrity there, or, you don't trust the other person fully with all of you, what have you. And these things take time, obviously, but then you don't get to actually see your potential as a human because you can't be creative. You can't pursue passions. You can't just be authentically you if so much of your dynamic is wrapped up in trying to fix the other person, trying to, as you said, swoop in and save the day, be a rescuer. Then you don't empower the other person to be a creator. It's just, you get in that drama triangle where it's like victim, villain, rescuer, and you never quite get out of it. There's no, if as long as you're in that, you can't be creative or thrive. But what I have experienced is just an immense amount of peace that's come from, and admittedly, that didn't come without work. We've had to work to have what we have, and what we have is invaluable. And when I say what we have, our fucking relationship, our family, there's nothing that's more valuable to me. My marriage, my family, my son, my truth, the way that I live, it's all built upon compounding interest of truth after truth after truth, no matter how hard it is, even if you think it's going to hurt the other person's feelings. Again, we're not perfect people by any means, but the amount of joy and levity that I feel, I can only speak for myself. I've been in several relationships, and for the first time in my life, I've got peace, and that is more valuable to me than anything. But that you have to ask, like, how did you get there? How would that come from? It came from having some really strong, non-negotiable values within our marriage with each other that we live day to day and don't waver. It's like there's no gray line here. This is what preserves our peace. If we think about what a few of those things are that I think people fuck up all the time. We were talking about this on our wall. One, your relationship with people of the opposite sex. And that goes both ways, and both genders will justify it. But for me, I'll just speak from a man. If it's not my mother, if it's not my wife, my daughter, like I don't give a fuck if I piss you off or if I ruffle your feathers. And that was a skill I had to hone with time because it was never taught to me. But once I got it, once I understood why that is, it became a no-brainer. And again, I'm applying this to both genders because both do it pretty equally, I would say. But I'll tell you right now, if you have friends of the opposite sex outside your marriage, somebody wants to fuck the other person, or they did at one point. It just is what it is. It's an open door. Like whether you know it consciously or not. It's if you're talking, especially if you're talking to that person about your relationship or marriage, you're already eroding the integrity of your marriage. There's certain things that are sacred, and your personal life with your partner is one of those things. Problems are one of those things. The only exception would be if you're outsourcing to a third party professional, knowing the other person knowing that, or you doing it together. That's the only exception to that. Outside of that, if you're talking to your family about your problems, if you're talking to a person of the opposite sex about your problems, if you're venting, if you're talking to your friends about your partner in a negative way whatsoever, it's not okay.
I think I agree. And I do think, and again, like this is where men and women, because I know women who are of the same stride, and, understanding evolutionary psychology has helped me understand why people do what they do to the degree in which we have a frontal lobe or a prefrontal cortex, which rationalizes things for us. So you always have like this post-decision rationalization of why that was okay. And we all do that, right? It's a coping mechanism, if nothing else. But if you remove that and you just look at what drove me to do that, I talked to you about this earlier on our walk, because he made a comment about an experience he had historically, where the term was, they were ashamed of their partner.
The person I was in a relationship with didn't tell people about me because she was embarrassed or ashamed.
From that angle, and this person seemed to have a following or on some type of platform. And what men, and what we typically don't discuss very often about women, is that women also have a dual mating strategy, and their short-term instinct. This is why you might love your husband, but have this pull to this other guy who's a little bit more on edge and a little bit more bold and a little bit more, just to that side of the extreme, the kind of douche male, alpha male douche. But for whatever reason, even though they're not good for you, you still find yourself, tracking that way. And then you have your long-term partner who's stable and secure and safe, right? Women will tend to build families and lives with men who are stable, secure, safe, but have short-term desires. And these are more so genetically driven, as far as like they have optimal genetics. Maybe they're bigger, stronger, faster, more disagreeable, like certain things that drive more masculinity as far as masculine traits. So especially around ovulation, women tend to gravitate towards that type of male. And all of that to say, women who keep the door open, specifically on public facing platforms, are keeping their options open, right? And we never talk about how women do this just as much as men do it, because oftentimes the onus on infidelity and such things is on men. And that is not untrue. The reality of that, though, is more women cheat today than they did even a decade ago. And looking at the trend, women are rapidly catching up to that on pace. And so it's important that we don't point the finger as if we do not have the same type of proclivities. And again, I'm not to take the information as far as EvPsych or anything around the evidence around this type of behavior, but the reality is you cannot practice restraint around something that you refuse to acknowledge exists within you, because it does. And so when you know that, it's like, okay, I'm not even exposed to this. I don't want to be exposed to this. And I'm going to be aware of my surroundings, environments, curate my feeds, my following, whatever it might be. So I don't even have that temptation in my mind. And I don't see that as a one-sided issue. So I just think that point is important to say. Also, regarding your male married friends,
I don't know them well enough. Like I'm not close with these guys. It's just guys that I'm acquainted with. Or that's, we go to the same gym and I see them in passing, and then I see them on Instagram. I'm like, why are you Because
I think if women tell men, and I notice this just based on what I do on YouTube, if women tell men, what they find disrespectful, men typically are kind of like, screw you. I think if men call out other men, they're more receptive. Yeah. However, when I look at dating market, dating space advice, and I see this on the women's side and on the men's side, it's always women attacking men and encouraging other women to not tolerate anything from men and that they deserve X, Y, and Z. And I've already done a lot of content on the whole I deserve thing. And then on the other side of the coin, the men tend to be more that red pill space, where it just becomes detrimental to, I would say, men's peace in its essence. So I don't think that's productive either. But you don't ever have men calling out men and saying, you deserve to be better for yourself. And by proxy of being better for yourself, you'll be better for the potential opportunity that you have in the future for a partner that matches that value.
Well, that's not sexy to say, so it won't get virility line. I'm sure there's guys out there that probably think that way, but you're never going to hear from, because the guys that are the alpha male douches are much louder and get more engagement from triggered people. Yeah.
And I find that to be the same issues that I have within my own platform. Speaking on those issues is, if I ever say something that explains behavior of women, then I am justifying female poor behavior. behavior. And that's not necessarily the case ever. And equally in reciprocity, if I give constructive feedback to men as to why they're not getting the outcomes that they want based on their decision making, then I'm victim blaming. And when men throw pop psych terms at me, I always find that fascinating because they hate it when women do it, but it's okay for them to do it. And so you just see this entire thing of like very immature, self-centered victim mindset people. And you can't reach people who refuse to take accountability or grow. And so then it's a lose-lose situation. But I do think some of it is within each gender, calling them out on their bad behavior, not because we're trying to take away freedoms, not because we're trying to take away rights, not because we're trying to, regress things that we've pushed forth. It's because those things taken to an extreme, just like anything taken to an extreme, become detrimental over time. And I think short-term decisions, impulsive decisions, hedonistic decisions, long-term leave people with a lot of guilt, shame, and regret. And I think the goal is to avoid those things, especially if you're somebody who's been there, and learn from them, which is one thing I very much admire about you, is the way that you're willing to talk about things that were painful, maybe even shameful. I know they were shameful for you, but I don't want to speak for you, and then openly say, hey, I've been where that lives. I've spent time in that environment. And here's what I learned and what I want you to avoid. And this is the path you are walking down, whether you're aware of it or not. Like, I think that takes a lot of courage because you open yourself up that way. There's also the opportunity for a lot of scrutiny. And people who will say, well, you had a problem, but I won't. Well, you struggle with that, but I won't.
That's
right?
great.
And
Good.
it's again,
I hope not.
the lies that we tell ourselves, though, because I do believe people think that because we have a consciousness, we can just override all of our biology. And that's just not how it works. Just because the world is updated and the modern world is way more than we could ever evolutionarily have prepared for, that does not mean that your biology does not have a role in how you behave or how you function or how you think. I think overlooking that is just setting you up to be very, very disappointed.